This is the final boarding call for a gate that has your name on it, and the agent's hand is already on the door. Do not scroll past this. This is not the first call. This is not the second. This is the last announcement before the jetway disconnects, and a flight that was booked for you before you were born departs without you on it. I have been calling your name over the loudspeaker of your life for months. You heard it every time, and every time you said later, later just ran out. I need you to understand what is happening right now. A gate in heaven, a specific gate assigned to a specific flight, carrying a specific destination that was prepared exclusively for you, is closing. Not because I want it to close, because gates operate on schedules that even my love cannot override without violating the structure I built to protect the journey itself. The seat has your name on it. The destination was designed for your life, and the door is moving. You've been living as though tomorrow is guaranteed, as though every boarding call comes with an automatic extension, as though my patience means permanent availability, as though the gate will stay open indefinitely, because the God who booked the flight loves you too much to let it leave without you. I do love you that much. That is why this is the last warning and not a silent departure. But love does not override timing, and timing does not wait for readiness that keeps postponing itself. You have been postponing this flight with the most dangerous sentence a chosen one can speak. I will get to it tomorrow. Tomorrow, the gate will be sealed. And what I need to tell you next is what was on the other side of the flight you have been delaying. Type final call if you have been hearing God's voice for months telling you to move, and you kept saying later, and something inside you just realized that later has an expiration date. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a simple 7-second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct. Click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. You have heard 3 boarding calls already, and I am about to tell you what each one sounded like so you understand. This is not the first time heaven tried to reach you. The first call came months ago. It was gentle, a quiet stirring in your spirit, a conviction that settled over you during a moment of stillness and whispered, "It is time to get serious with God." You felt it, you recognized it, and you responded the way you always respond, with agreement that carried no action. Yes, Lord. Soon, Lord. I know I need to. And then the moment passed, and the agreement dissolved into the noise of your schedule. That was the first boarding call, and you stayed in the terminal. The second came weeks later, louder this time, a situation that shook you enough to make you look up. A loss, a close call, a moment where the fragility of your life became suddenly visible, and the urgency of getting right with God felt not just important but critical. You prayed that night, genuinely. You made promises that you meant in the moment, with everything in you. By the following week, the promises had joined the others in the pile of spiritual intentions that never converted into movement. The third call came recently, not through conviction or crisis, through this growing unease that you cannot shake, a low-grade spiritual anxiety that follows you through your days, whispering you are running out of something you cannot name. Not time exactly, opportunity. The specific feeling of someone sitting in a terminal, watching the clock and sensing that the schedule is moving faster than their willingness to stand up. That unease is the gate agent making the final announcement. I did not send Archangel Michael to deliver the first call or the second or the third. Those were handled through ordinary channels, promptings, circumstances, quiet internal shifts. But this call required Michael, because this is the call that determines whether you board the flight or watch it leave. What I tell you next is what happens to the person who hears the final call and still does not move. Type third call if you can identify all three moments God just described, and you know in your spirit that you responded to each one with agreement that never became action. I have been watching you sit in the terminal, comfortable, distracted, fully ticketed, and it has been one of the most painful things I have witnessed in your life. Not because you are doing anything wrong in the terminal. That is what makes this so heartbreaking. You are not sitting there in rebellion. You are not defiantly ignoring the announcements. You are simply occupied. Your phone is in your hand. Your attention is distributed across a dozen things that feel important in the moment. And the boarding calls, each one louder than the last, are competing with a noise level that you have allowed to become the default volume of your existence. You are not rejecting the flight. You are just too distracted to board it. I watched you this morning when the unease surfaced again. That familiar tightening in your chest that arrives uninvited and whispers something about God, something about urgency, something about a door that will not stay open forever. You felt it for approximately 4 seconds before your next task consumed your attention, and the whisper was absorbed into the background noise of your day. 4 seconds. That is how long the call lasted before the terminal reclaimed you. I have been studying your patterns with the precision of someone who booked the flight and needs the passenger to board. I know what distracts you. I know the specific thoughts that pull your attention from the gate. I know the internal negotiation that happens every time conviction rises, the rapid calculation where you weigh the cost of responding now against the comfort of responding later, and later wins, because later always feels cheaper in the moment. Later is the most expensive word you have ever spoken, and you have spoken it to me more times than you realize. I chose you for this conversation because the gate agent's hand is physically on the door right now, not reaching for it, on it. The mechanism that closes the jetway is engaged, and the pause, the brief, merciful pause before the final seal, is this message. What I reveal next is why this particular flight cannot be rebooked. Type occupied if God just described your exact pattern, hearing the call, feeling the conviction, and letting distraction consume it before you could respond. And you are finally seeing what it has been costing you. I know about the guilt that surfaces every time you hear a boarding call and do not move. It arrives immediately after the nicknage fades, a quick, sharp sting that tells you that you just missed something important. And then, because the sting is uncomfortable, you do what you have learned to do with every uncomfortable spiritual sensation. You soothe it. You apply the balm of grace language. God understands. He is patient. There is always tomorrow. His mercy is new every morning. And the sting fades. The guilt retreats. And you return to the comfortable temperature of the terminal as though the announcement never happened. But the guilt is not gone. It is accumulating. Each time you heard the call and did not respond, a layer was added to a weight you carry in a place you do not let people see. It sits beneath your Sunday morning composure. It hides behind your spiritual vocabulary. It lives in the gap between what you know you should be doing and what you are actually doing. And that gap has been widening with every boarding call you answered with agreement instead of movement. You know the gap exists, and pretending it does not has become its own full-time occupation. I saw the night you could not sleep because the gap was too wide to ignore. The night when the terminal went quiet and there was nothing left to distract you from the truth that your spiritual life has become a collection of intentions with no corresponding actions. You lay in the dark and felt the full weight of every postponed obedience, every prayer you said you would pray, every commitment you said you would honor, every instruction you received from me that you filed under later with the full intention of retrieving it at a more convenient time. The convenient time never came, and you know it. I am not saying this to crush you. I am saying this because the gate agent's hand is on the door, and the weight you have been carrying is the exact weight that is preventing your legs from moving toward the gate. The guilt that was supposed to motivate you has become the very thing paralyzing you. The deepest wound is not the guilt. It is the growing suspicion that you may have already missed too many calls to still be invited. You carry this fear in a room you do not open for anyone, the room where you store the thought that has been pressing against your chest with increasing pressure. What if God got tired of calling my name? What if the patience I have been relying on reached its limit somewhere between the second call and the third? And what I am hearing now is not a real invitation, but an echo of one that already expired? That fear is eating you alive, and you have told no one, because admitting it would require admitting something you are not ready to say, that you have been treating the most important relationship of your existence as something that can perpetually wait, that you have given your best hours to your phone and your scraps to your God, that the being who created your lungs receives less of your daily attention than the screen you scroll before sleep. You know this, and knowing it without changing it has become its own private torment. I watched you compare yourself to people who seem to move when God speaks, people who hear a boarding call and immediately stand up and walk toward the gate without negotiation or delay. You watched them board their flights and felt something you cannot fully name. Not jealousy, exactly. Something closer to grief. The grief of someone who knows they possess the same ticket, but cannot seem to make their legs carry them toward the same door. Your legs are not broken, they are weighed down by later. And the cruelest part of the pattern is that each postponement makes the next one easier. The first time you said later to God, it cost you something. A sting, a pang, a moment of genuine internal conflict. The 10th time it cost you almost nothing. The resistance decreased with repetition until delaying obedience became as automatic as breathing. You have been practicing postponement until it became your reflex. And your reflex is about to cost you the flight. Type weighed down if you have been carrying the secret fear that you may have postponed too many times, and the weight of that fear has been the very thing keeping you from moving toward the gate. The boarding calls you missed were not wasted. They were building the urgency that brought you to this final one. I need you to hear something that will release the pressure valve on the guilt that has been locking your legs in place. Every call you heard and did not respond to was catalogued by heaven, not as a failure, but as a data point. Each one told me something specific about what was preventing you from moving. The first call revealed that gentle conviction alone would not overcome your inertia. The second revealed that crisis-driven promises dissolve when the crisis passes. The third revealed that low-grade unease was not producing action either. Each missed call taught me what the final call needed to sound like. This message, its tone, its urgency, its specific language, the deployment of Michael, the metaphor of a closing gate, was not designed randomly. It was engineered from the data of every previous call that failed to move your feet. I studied what did not work, and I built this final announcement to bypass every barrier that the previous ones could not penetrate. Your missed calls designed your rescue, and the guilt you have been carrying about treating God's patience as permanent availability. I need to address that directly. You were not entirely wrong. My patience is extraordinary. My mercy does renew. My love does not expire with missed boarding calls. All of that is true, but patience and opportunity are not the same thing. My patience with you as my child is unlimited. My love for you is permanent. My desire for you to reach the destination I prepared will never diminish. But the gate, this specific gate, this specific flight, this specific opportunity that is connected to a specific season of your life, operates on a schedule. And schedules have final calls that are final not because love ended, but because the flight has a departure time that even the God who booked it must honor. I will always love you, but this gate will not always be open. And the difference between those two truths is what this entire message has been building toward. The gate agent just looked down the terminal corridor, and he is looking for you. Archangel Michael is standing at the gate with his hand on the door, and his eyes scanning the crowd for one specific face. Not searching randomly. He knows your face. He has been assigned to this gate with a single directive. Hold the door until the last possible second, and do everything within his authority to get the passenger to the gate before the mechanism engages. He sees you, and he watching your feet. Something has already begun shifting inside you since this message started. The comfort of the terminal is losing its grip. The noise that normally drowns out the boarding calls is thinning. The distractions that usually consume the conviction before it can reach your legs are failing to activate with their usual speed. Something is different about this call, and the difference is not volume. It is accuracy. This call is reaching places the others could not, because it was built from the blueprint of everything the others taught me about your specific resistance patterns. Your resistance is weakening, and heaven can feel it. Behind the gate, on the other side of the door that Michael is holding, there is an entire trajectory that I prepared for your life. Not a single blessing, a trajectory. A complete flight path that includes the destination, the provisions for the journey, the people you will meet in the seats beside you, the assignments waiting at the landing point, and the life that begins the moment your feet touch the ground of the place I have been trying to take you. All of it is loaded, fueled, ready for departure. The only empty seat on the flight is yours, and the flight crew has been waiting with the patience of servants who understand that the commander booked this passenger personally, and the departure cannot happen without one final attempt to bring them to the gate. This is the final attempt. And what I reveal next is the specific thing God has been asking you to do that you have been postponing, because naming it will remove your last excuse for staying in the terminal. Type running if something inside you just stood up. And for the first time your feet are moving toward the gate instead of settling deeper into the terminal chair. Heaven is closing the gate. And the thing you have been postponing is the boarding pass you are still holding in your pocket. You know what it is. I do not need to name it with specifics, because the moment I say the thing God told you to do, that you have been delaying your spirit will supply the details faster than my words can. It is the thing that surfaces during every quiet moment. The instruction you received, clearly, unmistakably, directly, that you acknowledged with a yes and then filed beside every other yes that never became a step. That instruction is your boarding pass, and it has been in your pocket the entire time. You did not lose it. You did not misunderstand it. You did not need further confirmation or additional clarity or one more sign before acting on it. The instruction was clear the first time I gave it. and the 17 times you asked me to confirm it were not genuine seeking. They were sophisticated stalling. Each request for confirmation was another minute in the terminal, another delay disguised as discernment, another layer of spiritual language wrapped around the simple human reflex of not wanting to move. I confirmed it 17 times. You did not need an 18th. This is why the title carries a warning. Not because I enjoy warnings, because the connection between the instruction you have been postponing and the gate that is closing is direct and causal. The gate is not closing on a random flight. It is closing on the flight that your specific obedience was supposed to board you onto. The instruction and the destination are linked. The boarding pass and the gate are connected. And a passenger who holds the pass but never walks to the gate misses the flight, regardless of how valid their ticket is. Your ticket is valid, your instruction is clear, and the gate is closing. Not because heaven is punishing your delay. Because the flight has a schedule, and the schedule exists to protect the destination, to ensure that what I prepared on the other side is met by the passenger at the appointed time, rather than whenever the passenger decides. Convenience and obedience have finally aligned. They will never align. Obedience always costs the convenience. That is why it is called obedience and not preference. The jetway is beginning to disconnect, and you can hear the mechanism moving, not metaphorically, spiritually. Something inside you, the same internal radar that has been detecting the boarding calls without responding to them, is now detecting something it has never detected before. A finality, a shifting in the atmosphere that does not feel like the previous calls. Those calls carried urgency. This moment carries weight, the kind of weight that accompanies a last thing, a last chance, a last second, a last breath of open space between you and a door that is actively moving toward closed. This is not urgency. This is terminal velocity. The gap between the jetway and the aircraft is widening. The distance between your current position and the gate is exactly the distance your legs can cover if you move right now. Not in 5 minutes. Not after one more consideration. Not after you finish the internal negotiation that has already begun drafting another round of terms and conditions for your surrender. Right now. This second. Full sprint. I need you to feel what Michael is feeling at the gate. He is not calm. He is not stoic. The warrior who guards the throne of heaven is standing at your gate with desperation on his face. Not because heaven is weak, but because heaven is invested. The flight that is about to depart carries a destiny so significant that the highest-ranking warrior in my army was assigned to gate duty for one passenger. You are not a number on a manifest. You are the reason Michael is stationed at a boarding gate instead of a battlefield. And the sound you are hearing, the low mechanical hum of a door preparing to seal, is not punishment approaching. It is opportunity departing. There is a difference. Punishment follows you. Opportunity leaves you. And what is about to leave is something you cannot chase down after the gate seals. Because sealed gates do not respond to desperate knocking from the terminal side. The next thing I speak is the moment of decision, and everything depends on what your feet do in the next few seconds. Type sprinting if you can feel the gate closing and your legs are already moving, because you refuse to let this be another missed flight that you spend years regretting from the terminal. You just reached the gate. Michael's hand is still on the door, and heaven held it open for you, not because the schedule allowed it, because love overruled the schedule for one final second. The mechanism was engaged. The jetway was pulling away. The door was in motion, and in the space between closing and closed, in the fraction of a second where the seal had not yet become irreversible, Michael looked at the commander, and the commander looked at his child, running through the terminal, and said, "Hold it." Heaven held the gate for you, by the width of a single second. This is the moment. You are standing at the threshold of a gate that should already be closed. A gate that every boarding call was trying to bring you to. A gate that your delays and distractions and postponements nearly caused you to miss permanently. The jetway is still connected. The aircraft is still waiting. The seat with your name on it is still empty, and the door that was moving toward sealed has been paused by a love so fierce it bent the schedule of heaven to give you one more breath of access. Not stand at the threshold. Step through it. This is the last warning before heaven locks the gate. Not because heaven wants to lock you out, because the flight must depart. The destination I prepared cannot wait indefinitely for a passenger who keeps saying tomorrow. The people who will be impacted by your arrival are already in position. The assignments that are waiting at the landing point are already active. The life that begins on the other side of this flight is already in motion. Everything is ready, everything except you. But you are here now, breathing hard from the sprint, legs trembling from the sudden movement after months of terminal stillness, heart pounding not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of how close you came to watching this gate seal from the wrong side. You almost missed it. But almost is not the same as missed. And the God who held the door is looking at your face right now with tears that say, "I am so glad you ran." The moment you stepped through the gate, everything behind you lost its power, and everything ahead of you activated simultaneously. The terminal, the comfortable, distracting, noise-filled space where you spent months sitting with a valid ticket and no movement, that terminal has no authority over you anymore. The chair you occupied is empty. The distractions that held your attention are still playing on the screens, but you are no longer watching them. The noise that drowned out every boarding call is still broadcasting, but it is growing fainter with every step you take down the jetway, because you are moving away from it and toward something it could never compete with. You are walking toward your actual life, the one that was waiting on the other side of the gate. And I need you to understand what just activated when your foot crossed the threshold. The boarding pass you have been carrying, the instruction, the obedience, the specific thing God told you to do, that pass just scanned. The system registered your presence, and the moment it did, a cascade of preloaded events began firing in sequence. Your obedience just triggered a chain reaction in the spiritual realm. Assignments that were contingent on your boarding are now being released. Not prepared, they were already prepared. Released. There is a difference. They were sitting in a loaded state, waiting for the signal that the passenger had boarded. Your foot crossing the threshold was that signal. And the release is happening now. Not when you land, not when you are ready, not when you feel qualified. Now, this changes everything about the pace of your life from this point forward. The terminal moved at the speed of delay. The flight moves at the speed of destiny. And destiny does not wait for you to feel prepared. It moves at the speed your obedience activated. And the speed is faster than anything the terminal ever produced. You are not in the waiting room anymore. You are in motion. And motion at this altitude changes everything it touches. Type boarded if you just felt the shift from waiting to moving. And you know that stepping through the gate activated something in heaven that your months of delay had been holding back. Let me show you what the destination looks like. The place this flight is carrying you, that your terminal delay almost caused you to forfeit. The first thing you will experience when you land is clarity. Not the partial clarity of someone who sort of knows what God wants. The total, ground-level, unmistakable clarity of someone who is standing in the exact location they were designed for, breathing the air of their assignment, seeing the landscape of their purpose with eyes that are no longer fogged by the guilt of postponement. You are going to know exactly where you are, and for the first time, it will feel like exactly where you belong. The spiritual disconnection that has been haunting you, the flatness in prayer, the inability to hear my voice clearly, the growing distance between your faith and your experience of my presence. That disconnection was a terminal condition. Literally, it existed because you were in the terminal instead of on the flight. The moment the flight lands and your feet touch the ground of the destination I prepared, the connection restores, not gradually, immediately, because the destination was built to amplify the frequency between us. And a person standing in their God-assigned location hears me at a volume the terminal could never produce. You are going to hear me again, every day, without straining. The obedience you postponed, the specific instruction you kept filing under later, is going to become the most natural thing in your life once you arrive. Not because it's changed, because you changed locations. The thing that felt impossible in the terminal feels inevitable at the destination. The resistance you experienced was not the instruction being too hard. It was the instruction being executed from the wrong location. Some things God asks of you can only be done from the place He is taking you. Provision that was invisible in the terminal is going to be obvious at the destination. Resources, relationships, opportunities, all positioned at the landing point, waiting for the passenger who almost did not board the flight that would carry them there. People are going to witness the difference between the terminal version of you and the destination version, and they will not believe it is the same person. The you that sat in the terminal, delayed, distracted, carrying the low-grade guilt of perpetual postponement, radiated a spiritual static that others could feel without naming. Something about you was on hold. Something about your presence communicated incompleteness, not failure, suspension. The energy of a person who possessed everything they needed to move, but had not yet moved. That static just cleared, and the signal you are broadcasting now is completely different. People who had written you off spiritually, not maliciously but practically. The way you stop expecting movement from someone who has been sitting in the same place for months, are going to encounter a version of you that disrupts every assumption they built. The one who never moved, just moved. The one who always said later, just said now. And the visible shift in your trajectory is going to produce a Christ-bearing credibility that no amount of terminal-based promises could ever generate. Your movement is about to become someone else's permission to board their own flight. Connections are going to form at the destination that could never have formed in the terminal. There are people already seated on this flight whose assignments are interlocked with yours. People whose next chapter requires your presence in the seat beside them. Collaborative relationships, kingdom partnerships, friendships forged at altitude that could not have been initiated on the ground. Your seat is not just a seat. It is a position in a formation. And the blessings that were loaded into the cargo hold of this flight, provision that I packed specifically for your destination, are going to be unloaded the moment you land. Financial doors, professional alignments, relational restorations, all of them tagged with your boarding pass number and released the moment the system confirmed that the passenger who almost missed the flight is now confirmed on board. Type on board if you believe that your decision to finally move just activated connections, provisions, and assignments that were loaded onto this flight, waiting for you, and your seat in the formation is now filled. I need you to understand why I booked this specific flight for you, and why Michael was assigned to your gate instead of a battlefield. Not every passenger receives an archangel at their gate. Most flights board through standard spiritual channels. Promptings, convictions, gentle nudges that guide the passenger to the gate without requiring supernatural intervention. But your flight was different. The destination was different. The cargo was different. And the passenger, you, had a pattern of delay so deeply embedded that standard boarding procedures had already failed 3 times. I sent Michael because the mission required the highest level of intervention available. And I need you to hear what that says about your value. Not your spiritual performance, not your obedience record, not your track record of responding to boarding calls. Your value. The worth I assign to your life and your destination and your assignment is so significant that I did not delegate your final boarding call to a lesser messenger. I sent the commander of heaven's armies to stand at a boarding gate, not to fight, but to hold a door. A warrior holding a door is the most powerful statement heaven can make about the person on the other side of it. I chose you for this flight because what I placed inside you cannot reach its full activation at any destination other than the one this aircraft is heading toward. Your gifts, your calling, your specific anointing, they were calibrated for a location you have never been to, and the terminal, no matter how comfortable, no matter how familiar, was never going to provide the atmosphere those gifts need to fully function. You were suffocating in comfort and calling it contentment. I chose you because the destination needs what only you carry, not a version of it, not a similar gifting from a different person. The exact composition of your purpose paired with the exact environment of the destination produces an outcome that no other combination in existence can replicate. Your seat was not just reserved, it was irreplaceable, and so are you. The doubt surfacing right now is the terminal trying to reclaim you from 30,000 feet. It sounds like this. What if I boarded too late? What if the delay already cost me the best of what God prepared? What if I am on the flight, but the destination has been downgraded because of how long I waited? What if the seat I finally took is not the seat I was originally assigned, but a lesser version offered out of mercy rather than intention? That doubt is the terminal's Wi-Fi still connected to your device, and it is time to disconnect. Let me dismantle this with the authority of the one who booked the flight. The seat you are sitting in right now is the original seat, not a downgraded version, not a mercy accommodation. The exact seat that was assigned to you when I first booked this journey. Delays on the passenger's side do not downgrade the assignment on God's side. I do not reduce what I prepared because you arrived at the gate out of breath instead of early. You are in the original seat, with the original assignment, headed to the original destination. And the fear that your delay damaged what was waiting, that the years of later corroded the quality of what God stored at the destination. That fear misunderstands how heaven's storage works. What I prepare does not degrade in waiting. It does not rust. It does not diminish because the intended recipient was slow to board. The blessings at your destination are in the same condition they were in the day I placed them there, untouched by your delay, undiminished by your distraction, fully intact and waiting for the passenger who just boarded. Your lateness did not reduce your inheritance. It only reduced your time in the terminal. The terminal time is over. The flight time has begun. And the God who held the gate open is not spending this flight reminding you of how late you boarded. He is spending it preparing you for how extraordinary the landing will be. Type original seat if the doubt just tried to convince you that your delay downgraded what God prepared. And you are rejecting that lie, because heaven does not reduce assignments based on boarding time. During every boarding call you missed, I was not standing at the gate in frustration. I was sitting beside you in the terminal. You imagined me at the gate, arms crossed, disappointed, watching from a distance while you scrolled and delayed and negotiated with conviction. You pictured a God who was waiting at the door, tapping his foot with diminishing patience, each missed call reducing his desire to hold the gate open one more time. That image is wrong, and it has been wrong every single time. I was not at the gate during the first call. I was in the chair beside you, close enough to touch, quiet enough to not override your will, present enough that if you had turned your head even slightly, you would have seen me sitting there with a look on my face that was not anger but longing. The longing of a father watching his child sit 3 feet from a life-changing opportunity and choose comfort instead. I was right there every single time. During the second call, I was still beside you. When the crisis hit and you prayed those genuine prayers and made those promises that dissolved within a week, I was sitting in the terminal holding your boarding pass in my hand, ready to walk you to the gate the moment your feet began moving. Your feet did not move, and I stayed seated beside you. I did not walk to the gate ahead of you to wait in judgment. I stayed beside you in the delay. During the third call, the one that produced the unease you have been carrying, I leaned closer, not to pressure you, to be nearer, because the unease was painful for you, and I wanted you to know that even in the discomfort of ignored conviction, the God who issued the conviction was not standing at a distance issuing it. He was sitting close enough to catch you if the weight of it made you fall. I have never once waited for you at the gate with crossed arms. I have always come to where you were sitting and waited there, patiently, lovingly, painfully, for you to stand up. I know the exact word you have spoken to me more than any other, and I have kept a record of every time you said it. Later, not as rebellion, not with defiance, with the soft apologetic tone of someone who genuinely means it but never converts it. You said it with sincerity every time. I will pray more. Later. I will obey that instruction. Later. I will get serious about my walk with you. Later. And every time the word left your mouth, I heard 2 things simultaneously. I heard the intention, which was real, and I heard the delay, which was costly. I kept count, not to condemn you, to show you the pattern. I know the specific later you spoke last Tuesday. I know the one you whispered 3 Sundays ago when conviction rose during a quiet moment, and you negotiated it back down with a promise of next week. I know the later that was spoken in the car when a song came on that broke through the numbness for 6 seconds, and your spirit leaned toward me before your schedule pulled it back. Every later has a timestamp, and every timestamp represents a gate that opened and closed. But I also know something else about you, something the record of laters does not capture. I know that underneath every postponement, there is a person who desperately wants to move, a person whose spirit has been screaming, board the flight, while their flesh whispers 5 more minutes. A person who is not lazy but trapped in a cycle of delay that has become so automatic it feels like identity rather than habit. It is not your identity, it is a habit, and habits break. Your habit broke today. The later that was forming in your mouth, the one that was assembling itself the moment this message began, the one that was preparing to file this moment alongside every other conviction you have postponed. That later was interrupted by Michael, by urgency, by a God who knows your name, knows your pattern, knows the exact number of laters you have spoken, and chose this specific moment to say something he has never said to you before. Now. Not later. Now. Type now if that word just landed in your chest with a weight that later never carried, and you are choosing for the first time to respond to God in the present tense instead of the future tense. You are on the flight now, and there is one thing I need you to do before you land that will determine how you arrive at the destination. Act on the instruction you have been postponing. Today, before this day ends. Not the grand version your perfectionism has been designing. Not the complete, polished, fully assembled version that you have been waiting to feel ready for. The first version, the raw version. The version that involves one single step of obedience taken in the next 24 hours that converts the word later into the word done. You know what the step is. You have always known. The prayer you have been postponing. Pray it tonight. Not the rehearsed version. The real one. The one that requires you to open rooms in your conversation with me that you have been keeping sealed because unsealing them felt too vulnerable while you were still sitting in the terminal. You are not in the terminal anymore. You are at altitude. And altitude provides the safety that ground-level vulnerability never could. Pray the prayer you have been avoiding, and mean every word. The conversation you have been delaying, initiate it this week. Not when the timing feels right. The timing will never feel right, because your pattern has trained you to interpret every available moment as slightly too soon. The right time for a delayed conversation is the first available time after the decision to stop delaying. That time is now. The commitment you keep renegotiating, finalize it. Stop adjusting the terms. Stop modifying the conditions. Stop approaching your obedience like a contract negotiation where you retain the right to exit if the terms become inconvenient. The flight you boarded does not come with a return clause. You are on board. The gate is sealed behind you, and the commitment is no longer conditional. This is not about doing everything perfectly. It is about doing one thing presently. One step taken today dismantles the pattern of later more effectively than 1,000 steps promised for tomorrow. Move before this day ends. Not because the gate will reopen if you delay, because the version of you that just sprinted through a terminal deserves to land as someone who acts, not someone who agrees. You made it onto the flight, and I need you to sit in this moment long enough to feel what just happened. A person who has spent months, maybe years, responding to every divine boarding call with later just responded with now. A person whose feet were cemented in the terminal by a pattern so deeply embedded it felt like personality just sprinted through a corridor they had never moved through before. A person who had quietly accepted that they would always be the one sitting in the chair while others boarded their flights, just stood up and ran. You ran, and you made it. I want to thank you for something that the sprint made impossible to feel while it was happening. Thank you for running, not walking, not cautiously approaching. Running, with the desperation of someone who finally understood that the gate was real, and the timer was real, and the flight was real, and the cost of missing it was too catastrophic to risk one more second of composed hesitation. Your desperation honored me more than 1,000 calm commitments ever could. I know your legs are trembling. I know your chest is heaving. I know the adrenaline of a last-second boarding is still surging through a system that has been stationary for so long that the sudden movement feels almost violent in its intensity. That trembling is not weakness. It is the physical evidence of a pattern being broken in real time by a person who decided that today would not be another later. You chose today, and today chose you back. Feel the seat beneath you, the solid, assigned, name-bearing seat that was empty for months while you sat in the terminal negotiating with conviction. You are in it now, buckled, breathing, moving at a speed that the terminal could never produce. And the God who held the gate is not in the cockpit at a distance. He is in the seat beside you, the same seat he always occupied in the terminal, now accompanying you, not in your delay, but in your destiny. I am so proud of you, and this flight is going to change everything. Tight breathing if you are finally seated on the flight you almost missed. Heart pounding, tears forming, knowing that the God who called your name over the loudspeaker 100 times is now sitting beside you saying, I am so glad you ran. You are not the passenger who stays in the terminal anymore. That identity, the one who hears boarding calls and agrees without moving, the one who carries a valid ticket in their pocket while their body remains seated, the one who has perfected the art of spiritual intention without spiritual action, the one whose most used word with heaven was later. That identity was left in the terminal the moment your feet began running. You cannot go back to the terminal. The gate is sealed, and you are airborne. The person sitting in this seat right now is someone the terminal would not recognize. Not the delayed version, not the distracted version, not the version that treated every divine invitation as a suggestion that could be addressed at a more convenient time. The version that heard the final call and chose, for the first time in a pattern that has been running for years, to move instead of negotiate. You are a now person, and now people board flights that later people never reach. The destination ahead of you does not know about your terminal history. It does not know how many calls you missed. It does not know how many laters you spoke. It does not know about the guilt or the fear or the growing suspicion that you had postponed too many times to still be welcome at the gate. The destination knows only one thing. The passenger has boarded, and everything that was prepared activates for a passenger who is present, regardless of how late they arrived. Your history of delay has no authority at your destination. Only your presence does. And the God who called your name over the loudspeaker, who sent Michael to hold the door, who held the schedule of heaven open by 1 second so that his child could sprint through a closing gate, that God is sitting beside you right now, not behind you in the terminal, not ahead of you at the destination, beside you, in the journey, for every second of the flight. You will never hear another later leave your lips without remembering the sound of a closing gate and the feeling of a second that almost was not granted. And that memory will be the most powerful engine of obedience you have ever carried. The terminal is behind you. The gate is sealed. The flight is moving. And the one who almost missed everything is now carrying everything heaven stored for the passenger who finally boarded. Subscribe to this channel so that every time heaven issues a boarding call over your life, the announcement reaches you before the final call. You are not a terminal person anymore. You are a passenger in motion, and the next gate that opens will find you already standing at the door, because the one who learned to run will never again be the one who says later. Type departed if you are leaving this message permanently changed. Knowing the terminal is behind you, the gate is sealed. The word later has been retired from your vocabulary, and you are airborne toward a destination that was prepared by a God who loved you too much to let the flight leave without calling your name one final time.